GBGuns Armory episode 30. This is the series where we're talking about stuff that's been reviewed in the past, been out for a while, so chances are you have some experience and opinion developed on it that we're looking to hear and share. And I'm giving you a little bit more feels, a little more backstory, since the main reviews are typically fact and performance based. Today's topic, American AKs. This one is a Century Arms Visca, or Vishka, that I've done up a little bit. You can see I've got replaced the wood on there. I've got an ace railed gas block. This is a fun collector piece. That is an original 1950s stamped aluminum Russian AK mag. Super rare, super expensive, but since I don't have to worry about 922R with an American-made gun, putting it in there. Changed the grip, and then I have an ace folding adapter and a triangle stock because I always wanted a triangle folder. I think they look cool. The ace block, because it adds about an inch, also adds some length of pull, which for my 6'1" size makes this thing really comfortable. So, a little bit of lore time. It used to be that American-made AKs weren't something that could be trusted. They were something that would be laughed at and just couldn't be done. And I always thought that was weird. I mean, we're supposed to have been to the moon, right? How come we can't make an AK? What a lot of people I don't think understand or fully realize, and I've been to 3 different AK manufacturers throughout the years, and I've seen these things made. In fact, I've even worked on 1 or 2 of them. Don't know what serial number, so sorry guys. But the AK is more crafted than... To compare AK to AR, an AK is crafted and AR is assembled. So AR parts, I'm sure you guys have built some, generally great interchangeability, and you can just slap them together on the living room floor. In fact, I've built probably half a dozen on my living room floor. Just more comfortable than working at a bench, you know? Whereas the AK involves a lot of press fitting. You've got a barrel pressed into a trunnion. You've got a trunnion pressed into a stamped or milled receiver. Then you have rivets that require a certain amount of pressure to be doing their job. Too much pressure and you can ruin them. Not enough pressure, they're not doing their job. So there's a lot of actual craftsmanship required. They are truly built, whereas the AR-15 is assembled. So while it's very easy for anybody to do, set up a fly-by-night AR brand or AR factory, of folks slapping stuff together using some torque wrenches just to make sure it's consistent. Other than that, it's a lot easier than putting AKs together. Now, Century Arms was the first to have an entirely US-made AK, meaning the parts were made in the US and then it was assembled in the US. Prior to that, you had a lot of parts kits and assemblers, which does require the same amount of skill, but not US parts. And so when Century's first guns came out, they were ridiculed and challenged quite a bit. There were some issues with the early guns. That was all changed both at the factory and with the specs of the parts that went into the Visca. I know that gets challenged a lot, but I've actually seen it. As part of an article that I did for Ballistic Magazine a couple years back, I got to go out to the factory in Vermont and see it done. And this is the thing that I always get ridiculed for saying, but it's fact, guys. I've been to Zastava, I've been to Rifle Dynamics, and I've been to Century Arms. And the difference that I saw with Century Arms when I visited around the time of the Visca coming out was standardization. Century Arms has gone to great lengths to make sure that every gun is put together the same. Head spacing was checked no less than 5 times throughout the assembly. They had multiple calibrated tools being used to check every individual part. That is an advancement over the old world com block, if you will, assembling, or even some of the custom shop assembling where you're reliant on the craftsman. See, while craftsmen have put together beautiful AKs, no doubt about that whatsoever, you're still relying on that guy, Joe, to be on his game that moment, at multiple moments to put the whole thing together. And that can lead to inconsistency, and that's where problems can arise. The building that I saw at Century Arms was idiot-proof. Literally, you could not screw it up and have something make it past your station without the guy at the next station catching your error. Each individual rivet had a calibrated machine that you just moved along and got done. Then there's all the headspace checks, because every time you press something on, say it be the gas block, say it's the barrel into the trunnion and the receiver, all of that stuff, the front sight, there's a chance of changing things. And those of you guys that have done much automotive work, you know that once you torque a bolt, if you back it off, the same torque specs are no longer 100% effective, because part of torquing is stretching the threads. And once those threads have stretched, the dimensions are not the same they were for the original torque spec. If you didn't know this, it's something to be aware of. So the amount of pressure applied to seating any of those parts that I mentioned effectively changes depending on the order in which things are pressed. Because let's say you've got the barrel and the trunnion and the receiver, you go to press on the gas block, and that pressure, if there's not full support back here, is also going to be transferring into those other 2 points. And then what happens when you go to drive the rivets? How straight are those holes now? So there's a lot of things that go into this that, while great for a craftsman on his A game, makes it really tough to be repeatable unless you have a lot of control measures. And that's something that Century Arms put in place. To further prove that, I later went to Thunder Ranch with a Century Arms Visca Thunder Ranch edition, where 5 of us ran 1,000 rounds apiece of brass cased frangible ammunition. 2 absolute worst cases for an AK. Frangible ammo, if things aren't perfect in the gun, you often end up breaking the projectile and causing a really nasty jam, which I've seen in handguns. Did not happen in these guns. Brass case ammunition can be rough in AKs. Why? And never mind that silly thing that Brennan Herrera said about if it doesn't eat steel, it doesn't deserve the brass or whatever. Now, the AK was designed around steel case ammunition. As you guys have heard me say hundreds of times in our pistol reviews, the steel has a different expansion and contraction rate and different friction coefficient. So the violent extraction that is built into the design of an AK is dependent on and was calculating for all of that with using steel case. So when you put brass case in, it's not unheard of, especially if the gun happens to be slightly overgassed, to end up tearing the brass. The extraction process is so violent that it shears the case, and then you end up with a piece of brass stuck in your chamber. But guess what? There's no stopping a semi-auto. It jams the next round in there, and then you end up really stuck. Didn't see any of that running a total of 5,000 rounds through a total of 5 guns at Thunder Ranch in less than easy conditions is probably a good way to describe a Thunder Ranch course. So these things are proven to me, and I think it's pretty cool. What's unfortunate, though, is building an AK in the US costs a whole lot more. People wonder how AKs went from being dirt cheap to being so expensive. It's simple economics. Those Comblock AKs were made in state-run facilities with state-hired and controlled employees to state-controlled standards. The state wasn't looking to make a profit. The state was looking to make a fighting gun. You bring AKs to the US, and now you've got a lot of parts that require a lot of attention to detail in assembling. You've got to have all the tooling for it, because it's not like an AR where you just buy the parts from a wholesaler or manufacturer and assemble. And then there's a lot of man hours that go into building an AK versus an AR. So interesting factors there. I'm curious how many of you guys had thought about that stuff, and how many are into AKs. I love AKs. They used to be my go-to shooter when the ammo was cheap. The end of cheap ammo has sadly put a dent on my AK time. That's the topic of today. Just wanted to go over US built AKs and show off this build because it's pretty much the AK I always wanted, but couldn't get until later on. Thanks for watching.